What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the ARC podcast. I am your host, Brandon. And if you're new tuning in, thank you for joining. This is the Athletes Resilience Center podcast, where we talk all things mental performance in sports. On today's episode, we have an awesome one. It's really special for us because this is the first time that we're bringing on a guest for a third appearance. Drew Hopper is back. And if you listened to his previous episodes, you already know he brings a rare blend of real-world experience, military experience, and practical performance tools to the game of golf. Drew has spent over 3 decades in high-level competitive athletics, from wrestling to judo, jiu-jitsu, and to golf, and he's also a former infantry officer with deployments overseas. Since then, he's built a career at the highest level in the medical device sales world, earned his MBA, became a certified performance coach, and now works with athletes and golfers who want to bring their best game out when the pressure shows to be the highest. In this conversation in particular, we're diving into what Drew has been building behind the scenes, including a research study that's set to be published in the Sport Journal this September, and most importantly, the launch of his new Tournament Confidence Program, a 30-day system designed to help golfers regulate emotions, build self-trust, and eliminate the blow-up holes that wreck rounds. What actually happens in the brain and body under stress, how pros reset so quickly, and how to train your mental game in a way that's just as structured as your physical training. If you're a golfer, a coach, or any athlete who wants to perform consistently under pressure, this episode is for you. Let's get into it, and I hope you guys enjoy. Drew, thanks so much for coming back on. This is officially our first guest who has been on for a third time. So that's really exciting. We're super pumped to have you back on, Drew. How are we doing today?
I'm doing great, Brandon. How about yourself? How's it going? I'm super excited to be here for the third time.
Yes. Yeah. No, everything's great, man. We're in the midst of golf season, kind of getting the ball rolling there. We were really excited to kind of have you come back on and share everything that you've been up to, because it's been a lot, and I'm excited to get into all of that. But first, for anyone who's new listening, obviously we have the episodes previously. We mentioned that. If you haven't listened to it, please, I recommend that you go back and listen to Drew's intro episode and his last episode, where we kind of dive into his story on a deeper level. But Drew, I'd love you to give kind of the background of you and give everyone like a brief overview of who you are.
Yeah, happy to do that. So I've got about 34 years at this point in high-level competitive athletics across wrestling, judo, jiu-jitsu, and golf. Probably a unique combination, actually.
Yeah.
So I wrestled in college, and at that time, I also studied health education, physical education, and military science. I then went on to become a military officer right after 9/11 with the 10th Mountain Division. So I was an infantry officer, did some combat during that time frame and deployments. And then once I wrapped that up, I continued with wrestling and judo competitively at the national and world level for some time before eventually transitioning to career. And from that, had a 20-year med device career, 2-time vice president in that space, and all while doing that, continuing with judo and jiu-jitsu and golf. I did eventually step away from wrestling. With anybody that's listening that's wrestled knows that there's a certain window where that's an ideal sport for you athletically, and that window usually closes once you hit your 30s. There's exceptions, but usually it closes once you hit your 30s. So, during that time frame, I also got my MBA at SMU in Dallas, Texas, and went to Titleist Performance Institute to become a certified expert. I went to Performance Coach University. It's where we initially met to become a ICF board certified performance coach. So during all this as well, I'm raising a family. I had 3 sons, and all 3 of my sons are, they've done judo, jiu-jitsu, and golf, and one of them is currently a collegiate scholarship golfer. And the 2 other are coming up behind him and giving him a run for his money. So it's very much, a family affair, competitive athletics, performance as a mindset. We talk about sleep metrics as a family, one of those kinds of families. And so, we very much live kind of what I do with clients. We live it on an everyday basis in our gym. We've got one here in our home. We've got a simulator room in our home. We've got a 55-yard practice, two-tier practice screen with bunkers in our backyard. So we really live what we teach, and I've been doing this now for a long time, and so I feel like it's a great joy to be a performance coach and help others reach levels in their life that they may not have thought possible previously. So that's kind of like the skinny, if you will, and a couple minutes on me.
Yeah. No, that's perfect. Yeah. And anyone, again, if you want to kind of get a deeper dive into Drew's background and how he got to where he is today, please, I recommend you go back and listen to his previous episodes on here. They were awesome. But yeah, no, I think sport has been a part of your life and you embody everything that you kind of teach. And I'd love, the last time you were on here, we were kind of going over some of the things that you were working on. So we'd love to hear kind of what you've been up to recently because you haven't been on here for a little bit. And I know you've been doing a ton of work. So love to kind of shed some light on some of the things that you've been working on.
Well, so the quickest one to mention is we're expanding and continue to expand our client base, and even up into Canada, New Zealand, and obviously the U.S. is our heavy emphasis. Continue to see growth in our clientele in that regard. I think last time I was on too, I was in the midst of or had just finished a what was about an 87-day study, and got that together, did the analysis, and submitted it for peer review. And pleased to announce that it was approved and it will be published in the Sport Journal this September. So, really excited about that. It's a super interesting study. You can download a copy for free on eliteperformancejuice.com. It's right on the landing page. Just click the button that says download the study.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I do remember last time you were on the podcast, we were talking about that. And it was really great, the findings that you were able to kind of see and share, which is great. And congratulations to you. I'm really excited for you that's able to be published and, you get to share that with the world. That's so awesome. And I'd love, we kind of talk about that. And now the other reason that you're kind of on the podcast today is to share your new tournament confidence program that you kind of released that's now available to purchase, which is awesome. And again, such a cool thing to see the growth of this and all the work that you've put in. It's been awesome to see behind the scenes what's been going on. But I'd love you to, talk about that a little bit. And first, why you wanted to make this program. What's kind of the purpose of this and why you wanted to do this?
That's a good question. So the study preceded the book, and one of the variables within the study was assessing the player confidence before and after. And so we saw a 67% bump in average confidence of the players. And there are other metrics, but that's sort of the most distilled important one there, along with strength gains, ball speed gains. And that's sort of the other side of this conversation. But that was sort of the beta testing of, could a program like this have a real meaningful, measurable impact? And it was clear that it did in that context. So then I take a step back and I zoom out and I think about my career starting wrestling in Ohio in high school, in a top ranked high school where it was super competitive. You're wrestling against state champions every day. There's a lot of mental toughness that is developed as a wrestler as part of just the pedigree of being that sort of athlete. And then you take that to judo, to jujitsu, and it's a normal connection. It's just an easy connection to see where those skills can help benefit a golfer. And we see that with probably the GOAT, right? In Tiger Woods, where he was so mentally tough and so mentally resilient, and that defined his capabilities probably more so than any player in the history of the game. So I looked at those results from the study, and then I looked as I'm coaching and caddying in tournaments where I see really technically talented golfers and physically talented golfers who would have a hole or even just a shot where something, I like to call it, they hit a shot they wish they could repeat.
Yeah.
And then what happens after that sort of determines the trajectory of your round. And you see the 20% or so of, junior golfers, and I say high school to middle school golfers who can just roll with that. And I say 20% because I think the other 80% have a visible struggle with how to deal with it. What do I do? How do I do it? I'm not sure what to do here. I just know that I made a double, a triple, and my head is going to explode. Like this is what's happening. And we all know about the science. If you don't, I'll explain it really quickly. When you get super pissed off, you lose access to your prefrontal cortex. And your prefrontal cortex is what, from a hormone perspective, you just get flooded and you no longer can do that because you're in fight or flight. And so decision making and motor skills are controlled by your prefrontal cortex. And so it's actually not like necessarily your fault that after you get so angry or frustrated or whatever, let's call it low productive emotion and feelings that you're dealing with at that moment, you then kind of like have this inability to play. And it's your biology, it's your nervous system, it's all just doing what it's been taught to do essentially in that moment. And so actually what's happening is completely normal, but it's also completely avoidable. We see this because we see pros hit poor shots regularly and they have a manner in which they deal with it. Not all of them, but most of them. We've all seen Sergio Garcia's bunker incident. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go ahead and hit YouTube and you'll see what I'm talking about. And those are the moments where you're like, okay, well, this even happens to the pros. But at the end of the day, there's a way to respond differently in those moments that allow the golfer who has supreme technical, physical, and strategic talent, skills, knowledge to fully access and use those. And there's a way that I see most of the time, particularly in junior golfers, but also in collegiate golfers who are on scholarship in big universities and they have a 3-hole stretch. And coaches, if you're listening to this, you have a player on your team who I'm describing. They have a 3-hole stretch where you can't figure out what is going on with them. And it's like they're offline. They're not themselves. This is what's happening. And it's completely avoidable. It's completely coachable, teachable to respond differently and optimize your biology, optimize your nervous system so that when those moments do present, and they will, you know exactly what to do, exactly how to handle them. And so that led me down the path of after the study, after experiencing and seeing this over and over and over, it's like there's these people aren't getting the help they need. We talked in the pre-show about there's 100 swing coaches or more to every one, I'll say mental coach, but let's say golf specific mental coach is even more rare. And so there's this huge opportunity, but there's also this huge need. And I'd say it's an unmet need. And so I thought, how can I reach the most amount of people the most efficiently? And so I went about writing what is a 30-day program. And that program is really transformation focused. And it's the tournament confidence program. It's a 30-day confidence and golf performance program. It's on Amazon and it's transformation focused. It's all about helping golfers access their best game under pressure, right? And so this book is scientifically validated. It's been reviewed by sports psychologists, anybody that could help validate it. It's been tested by athletes, collegiate scholarship athletes, high school athletes, middle school athletes. It's been tested by PGA teaching professionals. So it's been validated in that regard to make sure that the transformation we're promising is achievable. I'll pause there.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. And I think, before we get into actually some of the more specifics of the book and stuff like that, I'd love to dive back into obviously the purpose of why it was written. And I think you had some really good points there when you were kind of discussing that of how a lot of these traits and a lot of, how we, I guess, address or our relationship with failure in a sense can be, taught, can be practiced, can be adjusted, can be fixed in a certain sense, right? Like I always look at things from my perspective of baseball and, working with athletes, working with pitchers. And you kind of said something along the lines of like, pro golfers hit bad shots all the time, but it's what happens the next shot, right? It's not blowing up in those situations. It's having a system put in place where if that bad shot does happen, you are ready to step up and stick to your process, commit to your process, and make the next shot an even better one, right? Like when I think of that in the baseball sense, Paul Skeens recently came out and was talking about how some of his pitches that he throws where he doesn't execute it the way he wants, maybe it's a fastball up and away, the next pitch then he's like, all right, well, I'm going to play off that pitch. So instead of it being a non-competitive pitch or a waste pitch, what happens is he builds off that previous pitch. So there are no bad pitches in that sense, right? He's almost taking something that is negative or bad and creating something that is even better because of that, right? It's like having growth because of that failure in a sense of that, if that kind of translates. But I'd love to hear your focus on the importance of that resiliency for the athlete, because I think that is something we talked about a little bit off camera, something that's not trained a ton or discussed about a ton, because we see a lot of athletes like you golfers, me with pitchers in the field, like if something's not working, they want to go scrap it all and start from scratch and get real analytical, when sometimes they have a process put in place that they just, maybe it just was a bad pitch, maybe it just was a bad shot. Just because something bad happens doesn't mean that you have to completely redo the systems that you have, right? Like, I'd love to hear your perspective on the resiliency factor and why that's a little bit important for those golfers like who would, read your program.
Well, we've talked about this too on previous pods where I compare being a batter in baseball where you're reacting to the pitch
Mhm.
in a blink of an eye. It's sort of an advantage actually because you're using the athletic mind. You can't stand there while trying to hit. You can, I'm sure, but you would tell me it's non-productive. And think about, well, is my elbow in the right position? Are my hands in the right position? Is my grip pressure in the right position? Is my left leg stepping towards the pitcher with, am I timing it right? Like you can't, you have to react to what you see coming. And because of that, you're not using your rational mind. You're using your athletic mind and you're responding to a picture. You see something, you react to it. Well, golf is, I guess, in some ways easier because the ball is static, but it's more difficult because you have all the time. Well, in some cases you're on a shot clock, but that's rare. You have all the time you want to think about that shot, basically from the time you hit the last shot until you hit the next shot. You could be thinking about it if you want to be. Well, that engages another part of your brain. And anybody that's ever like stood on a range or played around a golf and they have like 25 thoughts going through their mind and they hit poor shots knows exactly what I'm talking about. Your rational mind is not responsible for responding to the fastball. Just like in golf, your rational mind is not responsible for giving you clear instructions, what I like to call inputs to create the proper outputs. So where we can keep that athletic mind, that reactionary mind online, and our program does that. It's very prescriptive about how we get there, but it's customized to the athlete and how they think and how they, kind of considers their background as well as their uniqueness. But at the end of the day, the tournament confidence program, one of the elements is about activating that athletic mind and keeping that athletic mind online so that you can be sort of what I call out in front and reacting to playing golf more so than thinking through every technical detail, which just frankly doesn't work.
Right. No, and I completely agree. I think when you let your athletic mind take over and you are a little bit more reactive, like you said, and not, I just literally had this conversation with my co-host Matt talking about a couple guys that we work with. It's like you can tell when they go and feel the ball, the thoughts that are in their head. I need to get in this position. I need to go. I need to make sure my feet are here. My arm is here. I'm in these positions. And it's like that's what all of your preparation and practice has been for before that, right? When you're in game, that's the time that you let it fly and let the muscle memory there take over, right? Let your athletic self take over. Just go out there, compete, and do your job. Have fun, right? That's what you're there for. It's being able to express yourself on the field rather than be like over analytical and thinking too much about every little thing that's going on, right? And I think, like you said, that's the importance of having that resilient plan put in place, because there is something you can fall back on and trust and know I have the systems put in place. So I can go out there and play free, because I know if I do get into trouble, I can fall back on something that I've worked on and something that supports me really well. And, tying to the resilience piece, because I think this is a big piece of you and what your program offers, I'd love to hear more about your military background blended with that resilience piece. Like, what are some of the things in your military background that are brought into this program, if that makes sense? Because one, I think that's a really unique thing and experience for you, particularly comparatively to a lot of the other people in the golf industry. And obviously, there are tons of lessons there from your military background that you obviously learned and can bring to the table come the mental game in sports.
So I'll offer a couple. The first I would just indicate is like our first step in the process, we call it baseline. And I'll give you just an appetizer here. We're generally going to deploy box breathing for that immediately. So the moment that you become aware that you're in a state other than, call it flow state, if you're in any other state than flow state, we're going to immediately engage box breathing. Well, I think I mentioned I was a infantry officer with 10th Mountain Division and deployed to Kandahar, Afghanistan in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. Well, there's a lot of urban warfare and mountain warfare, but urban warfare specifically in Operation Enduring Freedom. So we were entering and clearing a lot of buildings. And you're a guest in another country. It's kind of always you're acting on intel, which intel is not 100%. There's always going to be estimations and misses, and just like the weather, it's intel. It's not perfect. So you might be walking into a building and it's a much hotter situation than what the intel would have suggested. And so if you've ever shot a gun, you know that you've got to be able to be calm and move fluidly in those moments to react to whatever is in your environment, and while identifying what you're reacting to. So using box breathing as we were going in and out of these buildings searching for persons of interest was part of our protocol. And we all knew that literally our lives were on the line with our ability to execute in those moments. And so golf is not that high stakes. So if it works for entering and clearing rooms, then surely it would work on the golf course to help you stay calm, to help you keep your heart rate down, to help you stay regulated and access your best, right? So that's one example.
Yeah. No, I love that. And we just had a guest on, it'll be last podcast, Gabe Rocha, and he talked about he works with bodybuilders, but he also works with fighter pilots in the military. So that's like his day job. And kind of hearing the lessons learned from working with, people in the military versus the sport, there are definitely so many transferable traits and characteristics and tools that you can implement. And like you said, having that calmness and that presence in a situation that is much more serious than swinging a golf club, right? Like in the grand scheme of things, much more serious. The stakes are much higher. Like bringing that kind of background into the game of golf, I feel like is, super important. It's unparalleled and unmatched, and something that kind of shifts perspectives when it comes to, how golfers are going to approach certain things, if that makes sense. And when you talked about the program as well, obviously you have your military background, but you also talked about the program in a very science-based and analytical sense, right? And I'd love you to kind of go into some of the maybe a little bit more nerdy analytical aspects of the program, or science-backed and like psychology-driven backgrounds of the program, just kind of going into a little bit of depth there about, some of the findings that you had previously, maybe some of the things that you guys implement that is science backed. I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, so kind of frame this up. My undergrad was in health education and physical education, and so I started learning how people learn. Then I did 20 years in med device, of which a reasonable amount of that was in training and development. And these are also high stakes, let's call them training classes. An example would be I used to work for Alcon. We did a very publicly known large glaucoma acquisition of Transcend Medical, hundreds of millions of dollars. And so you're training these professionals who've never done a surgical procedure to go out and teach this procedure. These are not doctors. These are very clinically savvy sales professionals, but you're teaching them how to do the procedure so they can teach a surgeon to do the procedure on a real person. The stakes are very high in that regard. And so you have to make sure that these people really learn this effectively. And so it's rigorous. It is truly like people will fail out because it's so critical for patient safety, for the long-term viability of the business, frankly, because safety is always key here. So we took some of those learnings as well on how people best learn and use those and leverage those within the program. And those are the same kind of principles that you're going to experience at a place like Harvard, Stanford, MIT. These are the way that these leading edge academic institutions are teaching their students. And so we're following that same example. And so it kind of starts there to make sure that we're going to have the intended impact. And the real simple structure on that daily is prime, teach, activate, and reflect. And so from, what might that look like for a golfer? Well, we'll just use the baseline again because we've already talked about it. So the prime would be explaining to them why it's important to keep your heart rate down regulated, to down regulate your nervous system throughout the tournament, and to upregulate your athletic mind, like explaining that as part of the priming. And then you're teaching them not only the importance of it, but how to do it, right? And then they're actually going out during practice or tournament rounds, or just like a qualifier round or a regular practice round, and they're leveraging it in the laboratory, so to speak, on the course, on the driving range, on the chipping green, and they're putting it into motion. And then they're coming back and they're reflecting that day on how they did. And then that builds day over 30 days until you have full fluency on the entire, I'll call it, ecosystem of how to do this. And so it started with structuring the program in such a way and leveraging that knowledge and expertise from the past to ensure that we were going to have the intended impact, and that athletes were going to be able to mobilize this program and use it in practical, everyday competitive tournament situations, whether it's your club championship, your high school state championship, an amateur qualifier, or your Wednesday night league with your buddies, that it's cutthroat and there's, quarters a skin on the line or whatever it is you play for. And so you want to win. It all is the same, right? The program works regardless of the circumstances in that regard.
Yeah. And I think you brought up too some of the aspects of like the science-backed situations and things that you can take from the research that has been done, or, the analytical side of things, and have like implementations that people can take away right away and use in their game that's useful, that's helpful. I think one of the things that kind of stood out to me, and I feel like will stand out to a lot of people, is you mention in the program kind of like emotions and feelings, and how we all have a lot of emotions and feelings while playing sport. It's very normal. And kind of the power of naming it and understanding it and having that self-awareness of being able to do so. I'd love you to kind of go into that topic specifically, because I feel like that's really important and something that a lot of people don't necessarily, I guess, take advantage of or utilize. And I'd love you to kind of go into like the significance of it and why it's important.
Well, it's what you just said, right? A lot of athletes are uncomfortable discussing emotions or feelings, and those are two different things. And so they would have a difficult time, like if you were coaching them and they made a double or a triple, they could have a difficult time explaining what they were feeling, what emotions they were experiencing at that moment. Now, why does that happen? Well, who knows? It could be a family of origin thing where mom and dad never talked about feelings, or grandma, grandpa, whatever your situation is. It doesn't really matter. It's important to me, but in the grand scheme of like this conversation, it's just that generally recognizing that it is a challenge is important, because if you can't effectively name an emotion, then it's difficult to tame the emotion. And when we're competing and we're performing, we always want, like, I always think of like a Madden score. If you've played PlayStation, college football, or Madden, players have a rating, and those ratings are across different attributes, right? Speed, hands, blocking, tackling, all that sort of stuff. Well, I think of golfers in that same way, where I'm thinking, how can I keep Timmy's driving at 95?
Mhm.
And how can I keep Timmy scrambling at 92? And by the way, how can I also elevate that, right? As a performance coach, I want to get you to 100, and I want you to perform at 100 on demand anytime you want to. That's my objective. So part of that is being able to observe emotions and feelings that aren't necessarily serving your interest, and they may be taking that 95 driving score down to a 65.
Yep. Right.
Right. And so observing and just, we're not judging. We're saying, look, our goal is to help you perform at peak, right? And to even elevate your peak. And so to do that, we need productive emotions, we need productive feelings, and we need a productive narrative about those, right? Whether it's you're having a bad feeling, a bad emotion. And when I say bad, I'm not trying to be judgmental. I'm saying it's not helping you perform, right? Just to be clear, there's good and bad. And for me, it's good if it helps you perform. It's bad if it hinders your performance. Observing those, being able to observe them without shame, judgment, defiance, and say, okay, that's not serving my interests. I have strong enough mind, process, protocol that I can now redirect, accept my circumstance, refocus on a productive, positive thoughts and emotions that are going to elevate my performance to that 95 and above in driving to me.
We want to take a quick second to let you know that today's podcast is brought to you by the Philly Pretzel Factory of Marlton, New Jersey. Whether it's picking up a snack between games or picking up a party tray for the big game, the Philly Pretzel Factory of Marlton has you covered. For all of your pretzel needs, make sure you stop by the Philly Pretzel Factory of Marlton, located on North Maple Ave. Let them know that the ARC podcast sent you. Now back to the episode. Yep. Yeah. I think this brings up a interesting point that I saw a video recently, and it's Ken Ravizza, who's like the baseball sports psychologist, and he talks about, I think in his words, he said like, fuck your feelings, as far as like high performers don't need to feel amazing every time they go out there, right? Like you said, emotions will come and go and feelings will come and go time after time. But like you said, having the systems put in place to be able to readjust and still perform due to those is what makes the best, because again, coming from a pitcher's perspective, like if you make 30 starts in a season, you might have all of your pitches feeling at 100%, maybe once or twice during the season. Like there are going to be days where you just can't feel, maybe I have no command of the fastball today. I can't get a feel for my slider today. And in golf, it might be the same thing. Like, listen, I'm no great golfer, but I have been there, done that. Some days you're like, wow, I feel like I can't miss a green today if I tried. And then on other days, it's like, wow, normally I'm really good with my driver, but I'm completely lost today. I feel like I have no idea what I'm doing. But the higher level athletes, right, like you mentioned earlier, are the ones that have those systems put in place where even if you feel like that, or you get in those states, you have practices that you can put in place that get you back to where you need to be, get you back to that state where it's like, okay, I'm here to compete and I'm here to go replicate the swing that I know I can, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so totally agree regarding state optimization as a critical part of this. Also in the tournament confidence program, state optimization is part of the last step. But I would say within the program too, there are two more critical elements. One is your self-belief and your performance identity and how those two things commingle and how they interact. And so I think also a lot of times athletes come to us with pretty well defined internal narrative and self-talk, and that feeds into their identity and their self-belief. And again, going back to that Madden score idea, I want my athletes to have 100 rating on self-belief, because when you may have those difficult moments, and we're going to, it's athletics. Like even Indiana had a hard time with Miami, right? Like it wasn't an easy game. It required a block, punt, and scoop and score for them to win that, and they were dominant the rest of the season. And so every sport has some sort of adversity. So programming in intentionality as a performance coach with regards to developing the most constructive, performance-oriented self-belief and identity is a critical part of any successful performance coaching mental game program, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I love the self-belief piece and the identity portion. I'd love you to also dive a little bit deeper into that identity portion, because I feel like a lot of times on this podcast, we've had on a lot of guests where we get to dive into like the identity of an athlete, what that kind of means. And I'd love you to go into a little bit deeper of a context of that, like identity for a golfer that you're working with.
Yeah, so within the context of the tournament confidence program, identity shows up in a couple different ways. It's sort of the internal dialogue that a golfer has throughout the round is going to give us clues into their performance identity. So part of that program that I'm mentioning is we go into this idea of the first story. And I had a meeting last week with a PG pro who's going through this, a teaching professional who's going through this program, and he was telling me about a hole where he three-putted to a par on a par 5 and then made a double on this next hole. He was kind of telling me the story about it. And the first thing that he mentioned was like how after he three-putted for par, he said to himself that was pretty pedestrian. Well, that internal narrative gives you clues, and it also feeds your identity, and it's giving yourself instructions. And so we want the first story to be uplifting, to be something that deposits self-belief. And that's also why the second part of this is affirmations, or affirm, which is our third step in our protocol. And within that context of that, we're looking to give ourselves purpose-driven, positive inputs that are more likely to create positive outputs. I'll give you an example. Maybe I have 210 yards left into a back right pin location. And so I'm about to hit this shot. What would be a good thing for me to do within the context of my process to help stimulate self-belief and performance identity development? An example would be saying, I'm capable of hitting a high cut 5-iron, 210 yards to a back right pin position that ends 10 feet short and left of the pin. Something like that. That was a little wordy, actually, but something like that. And then from that, you would then move into the next part, which is you're then prompting yourself to see that like you're watching a movie. And that's going to then begin to activate that athletic mind, because the mind takes instructions. The athletic mind takes instructions in pictures, not words. And so it's good to say the words from the context of, again, self-belief, giving yourself positive inputs, building up your performance identity. But then we also want to activate and bring online that athletic mind. And so we're going to see what we say, right? And so that's some of what we deal with. That's a little bit of a taste of what we deal with regards to identity, self-belief within the context of our programs.
The things that you do say to yourself oftentimes come true, right? And like you said, when you're three putting and you're saying, that's pretty pedestrian, and that's going to be a thought for the rest of the round, right? That's just something that's going to be in your head subconsciously that you don't even realize, right? And I think we see this a lot of times in a bunch of different other sports, and there have been plenty of examples of guys, utilizing different levels of self-talk and how that has elevated or decreased their game because of the way that they do talk to themselves. Because again, if you're talking to yourself that way, that's the way that you view yourself. And if we go back to the conversation of self-belief that you brought up earlier, right? If you're telling yourself that you're playing pedestrian, your belief is that you are playing pedestrian, right?
Amen.
Whether or not the other days of the week you're telling yourself you're the best golfer in the world, on that day during that performance, you're telling yourself that you are not up to the standard that you normally play at. And again, that's a belief thing and that's a statement thing rather than what's actually in your control, if that makes sense. I'd love for you to kind of share how you can use the program and who the program's for, and kind of then bouncing into how the program works after that.
Yeah, so I would say the program is for, to start there, anybody that wants to not only elevate their game, but play their best game, if you will, their best golf on demand. And I'm careful here because a lot of mental coaching is to, let's help you bounce back and let's help you rebound from, they'll even call it a mistake. I don't care for that term personally. Again, a shot I wish I could repeat. I think if you want to elevate your level, there's more to be had from the mental side than what you might estimate. And I say that knowing that myself, because I started playing golf with Captain Dickey in the Army. He brought me to the driving range and taught me how to play. And through my 20s and 30s, I depended on pure athletic talent. And, sure, I bought the greatest equipment that I could afford to, technical swing coaches. I worked out physically. I did all those things, almost nothing in the mental side. And that's so common. You hear that from so many golfers who just spent $700 on the latest Titleist driver, hoping that they hit it a little straighter and 3 yards further, right? Like, it's a thing. There's nothing wrong with that, by the way. Like, love new clubs myself. It's a happy dance the day that they arrive in the mail. I can't wait to open it. Like, I get it. I think the impact that could be had on 80% of golfers' game if they had something like the Tournament Confidence Program as a club in their bag that they could depend on, a weapon is what I like to call it, that they could depend on. How does that look? That could be the guy who's playing in the Wednesday night men's league. That could be a guy who plays only on Saturdays, who's, a professional that only gets to play with his buddies on Saturdays, but man, that round is really important. And he wants to outperform his buddies and win that game that day. It could be a collegiate golfer. It could be a high school golfer, a middle school golfer. The program has a lot of application and a lot of golfers would benefit from it. So there's 4 different ways to experience a Tournament Confidence Program. The easiest one is to pick it up on Amazon. And it's It's widely available on Amazon. Just Google Tournament Confidence Program and Drew Hopper, and it'll pop right up. That's self-led. That's the self-led version. There's daily integrated video guidance with that 30-day program. It's a great option for a lot. And I told you in the beginning, when I had this aha moment, one of the things I challenged myself with is how can I make this as widely available as possible, right?
Yeah.
And this is my way of doing that, because for less than the cost of 2 boxes of golf balls, you can have the Tournament Confidence Program and own it for the rest of your career. Fine tune it, tweak it, adjust it, but it's yours for life for less than the cost of 2 boxes of golf balls. So that's very accessible, right? So that's the first way. The other way is group coaching. So some people want a little bit more community and a little bit more accountability, because if they don't have it, they just know themselves and they're like, I may not do it. I may not follow through because I've got competing interests, whatever those may be. And so I need a community that I can text, that I can meet with once a week during this 30-day program to feel good about it, and to know that I have, like-minded people chasing greatness sitting next to me that are on a text thread, and we're sharing ideas, we're sharing our wins and breakthroughs. I need that for me to really do this. Okay, well, ElitePerformanceJuice.com, we're enrolling for the April 6th. At the time of this recording, which is late February, we're enrolling for the April 6th class. It's via Zoom. It's once a week on Mondays at 7 Central, so adjust for your time zone. We tried to pick the time that was best for everybody, after school, after dinner, not too late, not too early. For what would be the equivalent of $20 more per session, because you have 5 live group coaching sessions across that 30 days. So you get the book included in that you would get on Amazon. You get that directly from me, signed autograph from me. And then you get those 5 group coaching sessions as a community as well. So that's the second option. And again, those are limited. We have limited spots. Each of those cohorts that we enroll for is limited to only 12 golfers. And so if you're interested in doing that, act quickly, because then you'll have to wait for the next one or get on the wait list once that registration is full. The third one of the 4 is the same 30-day Tournament Confidence Program, but I call this the intensive. Some people want one-on-one coaching. They want to they need it. They need to have full access to a coach. They need to have that depth, right, of that relationship in order to get out of this what they need to get out of it. So that's the third option, the one-on-one 30-day intensive. Same thing. You have the 5 live personal one-on-one coaching sessions, as well as access to me. You get the Tournament Confidence Program shipped to you, signed by me. And then we go through that over 30 days in a one-on-one fashion. The fourth one, which is our flagship program, is based on our 87-day published study. This is the 90-day flagship program, and this is I call the Tournament Readiness Program. So it includes everything in the Tournament Confidence Program, which again, that's a 30-day intensive. It includes that, but it also addresses the other 3 dimensions of golf. Again, I'm a Titleist Performance Institute certified expert, so it includes a TPI screen as well as a custom biomechanical workout for you, for your specific swing, to help you optimize your efficiency, injury-proof your body, etc. Of course, other things like speed training are also offered as part of that 90-day program. If you want to hit the ball further, we work on that. We give you custom specific workout program splits to accommodate your schedule and your life to generate more speed. So that's the physical side. We also do the strategic side. The strategic side being course management, course planning, custom yardage book creation using advanced analytics. I've yet to find another golf coach that uses the course planning and the custom yardage book solution that I offer my clients. Still haven't found another one. So that's the third. And then the technical. Maybe you want to improve your putting, your chipping, your driving, your iron game, whatever it may be. That's also included in the 90-day program. So you're getting all 4 dimensions. Again, the Tournament Confidence Program and the Tournament Readiness Program in that 4th and final option.
Love that. Yeah. Now, thank you for kind of going into each of those. I'd love you to kind of go over too, we kind of went over how you can use it, who it's for. I'd love you to go into also kind of how the program works, like a little bit in the nitty gritty of like, maybe what does the mock daily structure look like? I know with the 30-day program, every day is going to look a little bit different, but I'd love you to just go over maybe the basics of like what some of the daily routines might include, maybe some of the reflections and stuff like that.
Just to start at the beginning, because why not? So the topic on day 1 is why emotional regulation matters. And there's a QR code that They scan to start the day, and that then pops up a private YouTube video to them that walks them through day one. So they're getting a 60 to 90-second introductory video each day to help prime them, make sure they're aware of what they're doing, why they're doing it. And it gives them a little bit of a coaching connection, even on the self-guided version on Amazon. So once they do that, the first step is prime. And the first question is, why does emotional regulation matter for elite athletes? There's some reflection there. And then how does losing control hurt your performance? So we're asking them to start reflecting on these topics from the very beginning. Then we jump into the teach portion. And the teach portion, we talk about emotional dysregulation leading to shame, anger, and self-sabotage. If you've ever been pissed off on the golf course, you can with 100% confidence say that you've self-sabotaged. It just is part of the process when you kind of lose control of your faculties. You lose control of your prefrontal cortex, as we talked about earlier. And so we then asked them to list 3 situations on the course or in practice where they lost emotional control. And so they're writing those out, those exact scenarios. And then what were the triggers? And I should say too, while we're going through this, and you may ask this question later, so if I jumped ahead a little bit, for the universities and the high schools and the middle school teams, anybody that's like a leader, a coach, a facilitator of a team, we also provide at no charge to teams a coach or a facilitator guide. It gives them day by day for all 30 days suggested formatting on how to run each day to make sure you're getting the most out of it as a coach and as a team. So that's available also. They just have to come to the website and request it when they purchase the books. Back to the Activate. So we talked about the 3 situations, and then we asked them to talk about, well, what triggered you? What was the thing that specifically triggered you, right? You were talking earlier about baseball where the guy throws a high pitch and then he kind of goes offline. We were talking about this before the show. For a golfer, it might be somebody was talking in my backswing and it pissed me off, or I shanked it, or I snap hooked a drive, whatever it may be. They're all like, we're all human. We all have these things. And so we're just asking them to identify them, to begin to become aware of them. And then we ask them, what did you feel in your body in that moment? What did you feel in your body? Thing about golf is you need fluidity in order to sequence the swing correctly. The moment that the pressure in your body is abnormal, your swing sequencing is abnormal. And then that tiny little face on that golf ball geometrically is off by, a half a degree. And a half a degree over 300 yards is way offline.
Yeah.
So we want them to become aware of that and what they're feeling, so that, again, part of this program is understanding what the feelings are in your body that produce your best performance. And then how do we get there? How do we create those feelings on demand? And then we talked about this earlier, what story did your mind start telling? And again, this is making them become self-aware. I played in a Texas Amateur, I caddied in a Texas Amateur Championship. I guess it would have been last fall, And there was an amazing D1 golfer that we were paired up with. And he played great for 17 holes. But there was one hole where Beetlejuice, like his head spun. He lost it completely. And I actually played a practice round with him too. So afterwards, I asked him if he was aware of what he had said on that hole, because he's just muttering and he had no memory of it. Like he literally blacked out. Right? So, and then, madness followed for 15, 20 minutes. So we're asking them again to start creating awareness, right? And these are non-threatening. Nobody's looking at this. This is your private document. Nobody's looking over your shoulder. We're just asking you to be radically honest. If you want to improve your performance, we're asking you to be radically honest here. And then what did you do next? Some people might say, I threw a golf club. I got real tense and pissed off. I started muttering under my breath. I yelled at my brother, whatever it may be. And then the next question is, how could you have responded differently? And so this goes on and on. And these are usually by the way, it's about 10 minutes a day.
Yeah.
An average day of this is about 10 minutes a day over the 30 days. If you're sitting down and you're writing this out, the R&D athletes who went through this, that was their reporting that some days was a little less than 10 minutes, some days were a little more than 10 minutes, but about 10 minutes per day is how long this took. There's some more of that, but for the brevity of the podcast, I'll just move on to then the next would be like the reflection. What did you learn about your mental game today that will support your future ambitions? And again, these are personal answers. Everybody learns something different, but having gone through that process, we're ending that day with reflection. So that's an example of how a day would go in the program.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. And I think The biggest exclamation point I feel like there too is being radically honest, like you said, because I think the most you're going to get out of this or anything in the mental game is being radically honest and creating that level of self awareness, right? Like that's what everyone's trying to strive for. And that's where we're going to be able to reflect our best. If things went wrong, why did it go wrong? And how can I correct it for next time? Those reflection pieces are ultimately so, so important. Now, we've gone into a lot of the details about the program, and I think it's kind of explains itself in this next question I'm going to ask a little bit, but I'm still going to ask it anyway. What makes this program different from others, right? Like, I know a big emphasis on the mental game and making sure we're dialing in on a lot of the self awareness piece, the reflection piece, and having these daily routines that create better habits for us as athletes. But kind of, if you could sum it up, what makes this program different from some of the others that you see out there?
So while it is a framework, and then it's kind of the sub layers of the framework where we're really digging deep. It's it's customizable, and it's personal for each individual that goes through it. So we're allowing space for you to be yourself. And I think that's critical because a lot of other programs might just be hyper prescriptive, do it this, and this. And while, again, we have some scientifically validated framework, we allow it to be customized and personalized for each individual, even within the context of a team of 8 golfers on a university golf team. Everybody's going to have a different ready statement, which locks you in for that shot. And, you're optimizing your state in that moment. Again, that's another step. We won't dive into that, but those are all personal. We just kind of talked on it a moment ago, but I'll go a step further on the emphasis on ownership, fluency, self-trust, right? We make you sign a commitment contract at the beginning of this. When you enter into this, it's on page 1 of the workbook, and it's not meant to be intimidating. It's meant to say, this is super important, and it's important to you, or you wouldn't be investing in this. And it's important to us, which is why we're so serious about this, but we make it known that you need to own it. And because of the way the program is structured, by day 30, you will be fluent. It won't be something where you can walk away from it and go, I don't know, I don't remember.
Mhm.
I can't I can't remember what it was or what I if that happened, then you weren't doing the program because you're gonna be fluent. And I think by the end, because of the way that it's structured, actually, I know by the end because of the other athletes who have used it. And by the way, I use it too because it
Yeah.
works.
Yeah.
You're going to trust yourself a lot more because you're going to be able to control yourself and your performance in a way that you never thought possible. And man, that is so, so empowering to be able to
Right.
trust yourself. And man, in golf, it's all about trust. And I'm sure it is too in baseball and pitching. Like, you're going to be able to hit that pitch on that spot. You're going to be able to hit your high draw, your high fade, your low, whatever it is you're trying to do. That self-trust is huge.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. The self trust is everything. And going on that, I think this is a great next question based on what you kind of described. Now, for you as the creator of this, what are some of the goals for as far as the destination of where you want athletes to be taken after they finish the program? Like, what's the goal of the transformation of this process, this program?
Yeah. So again, I like to simplify things. Going back to the Madden score, there's at the beginning of the program, there's 6 or 7 attributes, skills that we are going to ask you to self-rate on a scale of 1 to 10. And then at the end, we come back and we repeat that exercise to see how far we've grown over that 30-day period. So I'd love to get as many of those athletes to 100, or to 10, as it were, on that scale. And so we want to raise the floor, right? And we want to give them a higher ceiling, that the floor being the kind of the worst you can perform, and also elevate the ceiling so that when you are fully operating in what we call flow state, you're able to access a higher level of performance than you even thought was possible before this program.
Yeah, I love the idea of raising the floor. I think that's really important. I think we've had a couple guests on that have kind of reiterated that sentiment when it comes to the mental performance game of like a lot of what is most important with athletes and high performers is raising that floor. And, working with pitchers as well, like you see it where if you see guys fluctuate on one day, they're at their A game, the next day, looks like they've never even touched the ball before. Like it is raising that floor where, we don't need to make this peak any higher than it is right now. It's making sure that our floor doesn't get to this level anymore. We're here and then we're still hitting that peak, but we're maintaining a level that's consistent and we're at a higher place than where we were previously. So I love that idea of raising the floor. Now, as you're going through this system or this program and kind of seeing results from people and sharing it with others and going over kind of the implementations of it, what are a lot of the important takeaways from the program that maybe a lot of these listeners might want to hear or might want to see? Like, what's some of the feedback that you've gotten from the program so far?
Well, one of the athletes won their first high school golf tournament, on the heels of going through this program. So,
Yeah.
lower scores in general is the overall. And if you're a golf fan, then you may have heard of Decade, and Decade talks about bogey avoidance being like the biggest key to lower scoring, not making more birdies. Actually, it's avoiding bogeys and worse. And so if you look at like statistically junior golfers, college golfers, recreational competitive golfers, though, like what's the cause for high score? It often comes back to this. And so we see a lot of golfers eliminating the blowups. And so their scores are going to come down. And with that, they're going to enjoy the game a lot more than what they were previously when they didn't have the benefit of this structure. Overall, though, athletes say I feel more confident. I feel more prepared. I feel like I can trust myself. And if something gets off plan, then I can get right back on plan and not miss a beat. And I avoid the blow up holes. And it's like we were just talking about. That's the floor, right? Is if you're living in this, call it unwound, out of control moment, then usually there's a lot of negativity that follows that. And so that negativity is often, reduced or eliminated completely. So that composure and the resilience is what ends up showing up. And by the way, it starts to show up before 30 days. It starts to show up week 1.
Yeah.
They're already thinking differently. They're already so introspective that they're like, there's a different way to do this.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I can already see myself changing where I have less anxiety over shots, more confidence, more belief, and the results are starting to match what I see in my mind.
Yeah. Right. No, I think that's everything, right? Like having less anxiousness going out there and trusting yourself, having that self-belief is like everything. And now, I'm going to take a reflection piece from your book and I'm going to turn it back on you now. I'd love you to reflect and talk about maybe some of the challenges that you faced while creating this and getting it published because, probably took a while and it took a lot of time and effort out of you. I'd love to hear some of the challenges that maybe you ran into while, one, coming up with this, and two, getting it published and ready to get it out to the public.
So I think the first one is like you're solving for like middle schoolers to senior citizens.
Yeah.
And kind of anything in between. And so you want to put a certain amount of scientific rigor in the book, especially the way I was brought up to do this sort of thing. And by brought up, I mean like military, medical device, performance coaching. Like you want a certain amount of like scientific rigor behind it, but you want to make it accessible so that a 7th grader or a 70-year-old can read it in plain language and say, I get it.
Yeah.
I understand. Like,
Right.
and not make it I don't know, an ego-driven program. It's a result-driven program.
Right.
So balancing the research depth and the content depth with really user-friendly and actionable content, that was probably the greatest balancing act because most of these programs are probably written for a narrower demographic. And we were trying, again, part of the calling of this is how can I make the broadest impact in the golf community possible, right? So that was part of the challenge. And then I think like doing the research with the R&D athletes as well as the brand ambassadors to go through the program, iterate the program, get weekly feedback on, well, this part was confusing. This part really helped. You should emphasize this a lot more. You can go deeper here. This seemed like it wasn't really important. And you got to take that and you got to, refine it and tweak it and adjust it and inform. And then taking what you think is a pretty good draft and then floating it by psychologists and performance coaches who are well informed and other high level professionals to blow it up. right? Like that part where you iterate and you iterate and you iterate, and then you finally get to the point where you're ready to push the Amazon manuscript upload button, and it's
Yeah.
like, okay, like
Yeah.
now we have cover art, we have a 76-page vetted program, we're ready to go. I think doing a program like this, you have to be committed to the process, and you have to be committed to an excellent product. And it's going to take a lot. It took a lot more iterations than what I had hoped it would initially. But yeah, those are some of them.
Yeah. No, I think, in a lot of senses, obviously, like you said, maybe more iterations than you initially wanted or anticipated, but that's what's going to make for the best version of everything. And I think that's kind of the summary of the program in itself, right? It's like the reflection piece and keep adjusting and getting better every single day. And clearly that's what this program has become. So, it's awesome. And I think it will help a ton of athletes, a ton of golfers. I think this is a perfect time too for you to kind of maybe share where people can get the program and also where people can find you if they want to learn more about the program and more about you and potentially working with your program and yourself.
Yeah. So you can go to eliteperformancejuice.com, eliteperformancejuice.com. The landing page is going to have a 4 block there. When you scroll down a little bit, that shows our 4 offers that I mentioned earlier. The book, you can click the link and it'll go right to Amazon. You can buy it directly off of Amazon if you want to go down that path. If you want to go down the group coaching path, again, April 6th, you can click on that link and you would enroll online right there and save your spot. You'll then get like a confirmation email and a Zoom link and all that sort of stuff, and the book will be mailed to you. Then the other 2 programs that I mentioned, the one-on-one programs, the 30-day and the 90-day program, those are also there. And so that they can access all that on Elite Performance Juice. And then my YouTube channel, which has grown quite a bit since our last time here.
Yep. Yep.
Performance Juice. So you can find me there on YouTube as well as Instagram. The emphasis right now is really on YouTube. We are doing Instagram content as well, but we're seeing a really strong response from the YouTube community. So a lot of great content there, whether it's on mental game or some of the other things like swing speed training, etc. You can find there on Performance Juice on YouTube.
Yeah, no, and you guys are doing a great job over there on YouTube. I love the content that you guys are putting out, so I appreciate that. But Drew, I really appreciate you coming on here and taking the time to talk about the program, all the things that you've been up to, and being able to share all this knowledge with everyone, all the listeners, and anyone who might be interested in getting the program and utilizing the program. So I really appreciate you taking the time to come on here and share that with us. It's awesome to see all the hard work that you've put in and it paying off in this program. And it's awesome, man. I'm excited to see all the results because it's gonna be fun.
I appreciate it. I'm happy to be here for the 3rd time, and
Yeah.
we'll have to make something else huge happen and make it a 4th time in the future.
Yeah. No, I agree. I look forward to that fourth time, Drew. Thank you so much, man.
Appreciate it, man. Thanks, Brandon.
Yep.